Okay, hello there. I'm John Salisbury, and I'm from Scottsdale, Arizona. And I just happened to bump into my good buddy here, Chad, from Third Eye Threads. Haven't seen him for about, what we say, 4 years.
Yep.
And I just happened to bump into him at Tim Miller's studio, where I'm taking a third series yoga training, the first one that Tim's ever done. And we're just going to talk a little bit about my journey into yoga, and it's perfect that it starts here in Encinitas. And we're having some fish tacos right now, watching the sunset. It's pretty cool. So I was telling Chad that, actually I was having a conversation with Tim Miller yesterday, and I was asking him how he met this guy Anthony Carlisi, known as Prem, and his girlfriend or wife, Heather. And Tim was telling me that he had actually been roommates with Anthony a long time ago here in Encinitas for about a year. And after the year was up, Anthony said that he's going to move to Arizona to live with his wife. His wife was from, or his girlfriend at the time, was from Arizona, and so they moved out to Arizona. So that's where we are. We're out there. My stepdad was a school teacher, and Anthony, he actually met him substituting. He was a substitute teacher, and that was his gig for a little while, as well as, of course, being this great yogi, which I guess I didn't mention, that him and Tim both spent some time in Mysore, as well as living out here in Encinitas, like I said, for the year. So my dad came to him, and you know, I just happened to know him at the school, teaching, I think it was middle school, and he happened to tell Anthony that he was having some back problems, and my stepdad was really big into beach volleyball, really big into sports. He also coached indoor volleyball, and so he's having some back problems, and he just happened to know or meet Anthony, and Anthony said, why don't you come do some yoga with me at my house? So they just rolled out a couple mats in his living room and proceeded to practice with this guy Anthony for about 2 years. From what my dad tells me, it was just mostly just the two of them. So my dad was pretty dedicated. He practiced a lot, and I took it real seriously, got into it, got into a lot of the philosophy, but the practice was his main thing. So that, you know, eventually brought us to bring Tim Miller out and to practice with him. So eventually after that, my dad started traveling here probably once a month to practice with Tim, as well as play beach volleyball out here in San Diego. So I saw my dad get into yoga when I was about 15 years old, and he was actually almost about to turn 41, so he was 40 years old when he got into it.
But he got into Ashtanga yoga, not just Hatha yoga.
No, regular yoga. The first thing he learned was Ashtanga yoga with Anthony. Anthony, you know, knew Tim. They did the thing in Mysore. It was all Ashtanga, so when he started, it wasn't like he had some back problems, so what should I do? Here's a couple forward folds. It was like, no, let's start practicing Ashtanga yoga. So he got in, you know, real heavy right from the beginning. And like I said, he was almost 41 years old. And he was super disciplined. When he really, really liked something, he went after it, and he'd be super dedicated. So he taught out there for about 27 years. And I, like I said, was about 15 years old when he started. And he tried to show me a couple things, but as a 15-year-old, I was really interested in just skateboarding. So I didn't really get into the yoga. I had no interest. And so I watched him practice down in our living room often. And at about 18, my real father wanted me to move out to Huntington Beach, where he was located, to go to school. So I moved out to Huntington and proceeded to go to community college, and I wasn't really doing what I wanted to do. He wanted me to be a business major because he was a stockbroker. He wanted me to take over his business one day, but I really had no interest. So like any kid that is doing what they don't want to do, I rebelled, and I just started partying a lot, going to a lot of clubs and raves and whatnot in LA. So eventually I had to leave, but before I left, I was introduced by one of my fathers, my real father. One of his friends actually handed me a book, and it's great that we're here in Encinitas because it was an autobiography of a yogi from Paramahansa Yogananda. And within that book, he discusses a lot of other faiths and ties it back into what he knows from yoga. And a lot of the things he tied in was from, you know, the Bible and the Christian background. And so my real father, I'm living out here, my real father was a stockbroker, but also, he still is a stockbroker, but he was also a pastor. And so I was basically forced, whatever, you know, go to church. I've been going to church all my life, Catholic school, not Catholic school, but Catholic religious education classes and Bible studies, and the Catholic church and whatnot. My uncle, my grand uncle was like a bishop, and so anyway, my dad's a priest, and so I had all that, you know, background. So I got this book, and Paramahansa is referencing all these verses and phrases from the Bible, and he's making complete sense. And it's tripping me out a little bit, so I called my stepdad and I said, you know, I read this book, and he said, I read that book too, and he said, listen, I want you to read a couple other books. I read some other books, and then eventually I just decided that I couldn't stay in LA anymore, so I moved back to Phoenix, Scottsdale, and once I got back there, I was 22 years old, and the first class that I took then was an Ashtanga yoga class, so that's how I got introduced into it, and my journey began at 22.
Where was the class?
It was in my dad's garage. So he had a triple car garage. So you got the big double, and you got the single.
Yep.
And so he took that single and he made it into a yoga. So it was a yoga studio with wood floors, sealed in, a door to get in and out, everything. And it would fit 12 people. We put 5 on one side, 5 on the other, and 2 in the middle. And so we could fit 12 people in there. It was packed in, but that's what we did. And so he held classes out of that place for years. And I mean, I must have practiced, I don't know how many times in that, but I mean, I lived with him for a little while when I came back, and we would go in there and practice together. And so, you know, besides that, we had other places we went to. My first teacher training was with him, not necessarily focused on Ashtanga yoga. It was for, I mean, it was like 19 women and me. They're all older, pretty much. And my stepdad told me I was going to be doing this training. He didn't even ask me. I didn't want to teach. I just wanted to practice. You know, it was a really, really good time, and it was really great because he wasn't just a dedicated practitioner, but he was also an English major. He had a master's degree in English, so he got really deep into Sanskrit. And so he's real big on the philosophy. So that had a good impact too, because it wasn't just the physical part. He really was well-rounded on what we were doing with the language, the philosophy, and the practice. So he tied it in well. He was a horrible singer, but man, he tried so hard to chant. And I gotta hand it to him. He was never afraid to let us hear his sound. It was a bad sound, but he'd let us hear that sound, and he was not shy about it.
You said this was all around the mid-1980s.
Yeah, well, when I started, like, he got in probably about 1987. Let's see, 7 years. Yeah, 1987, and when I started, it was 1994. And so out there in Phoenix, there wasn't a lot. Mm-hmm. There was maybe one yoga studio. There was nothing. So when he started, it was before any major studio ever came into play, was ever created. So it was ground floor out there. It was great.